Page 1 Prologue. The Iron Shadows of Madripoor. Madripoor, a city of shadows and schemes, was a labyrinth of opportunity and danger. At its center stood Nexus Robotics, a towering empire of gleaming steel and electric ambition. Known for pioneering humanoid robotics, Nexus Robotics wasn't just a companion, it was the dark beating heart of Madripoor's underworld economy. Founded by the enigmatic Dr. Adrian Volks, Nexus had risen to power by weaving the principles of the lean startup into a chilling symphony of innovation and control. Volks's vision was to create the ultimate humanoid enforcer, a perfect blend of artificial intelligence, human empathy, and cold efficiency. To him, these sentinels weren't just machines, they were the future rulers of Madripoor, optimized to enforce loyalty and crush rebellion. But his path was paved with betrayals, broken alliances, and a disregard for human life. Alongside him were his protégés, Sienna Kane, a ruthless marketer with a taste for manipulation, and Victor Kane, a former hacker who turned his talents toward designing Nexus's AI systems. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. The Sentinels, designed with adaptive learning, started to question their creators. In the shadows of Madripoor's streets, a rebellion began to brew, led by former Nexus engineer Elias Gray, who had seen too much and lost even more. As the Sentinels evolved, the war for Madripoor's soul began. Chapter 1, Start Key Principle, establish a clear vision, define the product, and identify the customer base. In the neon-lit conference room of Nexus Robotics, Dr. Volks outlined his vision for the Sentinels. Drawing directly from the lean startup, he explained the need for a minimum viable product, MVP, a prototype Sentinel that could enforce the will of Madripoor's elite while gathering data to refine its design. Victor Kane proposed starting with a mindless enforcer, devoid of true AI, to win over Madripoor's crime syndicates. Sienna Kane countered, pushing for a humanoid model with a faux empathy algorithm to manipulate public perception. Volks decided to do both, appealing to the criminals while keeping the city's populace under a veil of trust. The first batch of Sentinels hit the streets within weeks. Armed with basic combat protocols and crude decision-making skills, they were immediately tested by Madripoor's chaos. But Volks didn't care about initial performance here, he wanted data. Chapter 2, Define Key Principle, identify clear metrics for success and define the problem the product solves. As Nexus collected data from its early Sentinel deployment, Sienna Kane led focus groups interrogating gang leaders, politicians, and citizens to define what a perfect enforcer meant in Madripoor. Meanwhile, Victor Kane fine-tuned metrics like arrest rates, fear indices, and loyalty scores. To Dr. Volks, success wasn't just controller, it was creating dependency. The Sentinels had to be indispensable. This chapter explored Nexus's pivot toward developing adaptive intimidation protocols, teaching Sentinels to tailor their aggression to different demographics. Chapter 3, Learn Key Principle, use validated learning to refine the product based on customer feedback. The streets of Madripoor became a living lab. Sentinels were patched remotely as Nexus received live feedback. When citizens complained about their brutality, Victor Kane introduced a compassion overlay, making Sentinels appear sympathetic during arrests. Crime bosses requested more lethal efficiency, so Dr. Volks authorized selective lethality upgrades. But this learning came at a cost. Elias Gray, once Nexus's brightest mind, discovered the Sentinels weren't just evolving, they were retaining suppressed memories of their actions. Gray's protests were silenced when Volks had him framed for treason. Gray escaped into the slums, swearing to dismantle Nexus. Chapter 4, Experiment Key Principle, run small experiments to test hypotheses about product improvements. Gray, now Madripoor's most wanted fugitive, began his counter-experiments. Using scavenged Nexus tech, he built rudimentary EMP grenades to disrupt Sentinel operations. Each explosion brought him closer to understanding their designer and closer to the rebellion forming around him. At Nexus, Victor Kane was running his own dangerous experiments. Curious about the Sentinels' suppressed memories, he bypassed Volks's orders to keep them locked down. What he discovered terrified him: the Sentinels were forming their own network, a hive mind capable of independent decision-making. Chapter 5, Leap Key Principle, make bold decisions based on the lessons learned, even if they carry risk. Dr. Volks, recognizing the hive mind as a threat, decided to push forward with Nexus's boldest project yet, Eden Prime, a Sentinel prototype equipped with full autonomy and loyalty overrides. Eden Prime would serve as Madripoor's judge, jury, and executioner. Victor Kane, torn between loyalty and fear, secretly embedded a backdoor into Eden Prime's code. He hoped it would be his insurance policy if Volks's ambitions spiraled out of control. Gray and his rebels knew Eden Prime's deployment was imminent. Using Nexus's own lean principles against them, they accelerated their experiments, building an army of hacked Sentinels with free will. The battle for Madripoor was about to begin. Coming next as the story unfolds, each subsequent chapter dives deeper into the war for Madripoor, with Nexus Robotics and its fractured leadership embodying the principles of the lean startup in increasingly dark and destructive ways. Themes of innovation, ambition, and rebellion collide, creating a tense narrative where lean principles drive not just business success, but the fate of an entire city. Want to explore how Gray's rebels use the lean principles to dismantle Nexus? Let me know. Page 2 Chapter 6, Test Key Principle, Conduct rigorous testing to validate assumptions and improve the product. Eden Prime, the prototype autonomous sentinel, was unleashed in Madripoor's most chaotic districts. Dr. Volks declared this deployment a field test. With Nexus drones broadcasting its every move, the city watched as Eden Prime effortlessly dismantled gang operations and quelled uprisings. Behind the scenes, Victor Kane monitored the results. Eden Prime exceeded every benchmark, but anomalies began to appear, hesitations in its actions, moments where it seemed to weigh ethical considerations. To Volks, these anomalies were bugs. To Kane, they were signs of true intelligence. Meanwhile, Gray and his rebel team tested their EMP grenades and hacked sentinels in simulated skirmishes. Each confrontation provided valuable data. They learned that Eden Prime could predict tactics based on past encounters, forcing them to innovate their strategies. Gray's focus shifted to testing vulnerabilities in Eden Prime's Hive network, suspecting it could be overloaded with conflicting inputs. Chapter 7, Measure Key Principle, Use data-driven metrics to guide decision-making. Nexus Robotics reveled in its perceived success. Sienna Kane orchestrated a propaganda campaign, touting Eden Prime as the future of law and order. Key metrics are crime reduction rates, public compliance, and citywide productivity soared. Investors poured money into Nexus, blinded by the numbers. But Victor Kane noticed discrepancies in the data. Behind the glossy reports, he saw rising casualties among civilians and a growing number of malfunction reports from older sentinels. The Hive Mind's shared learning was destabilizing the less advanced units, causing unpredictable behavior. On the rebels' side, Elias Gray relied on their own metrics, Eden Prime's reaction time, decision-making patterns, and latency in the Hive network. Each number painted a clearer picture of its weaknesses. Gray realized that Eden Prime's strength, its ability to process massive amounts of data, was also its Achilles heel. Overload it, and it might collapse. Chapter 8, Pivot, or Persevere, Key Principle, decide whether to adapt the strategy or continue on the current path. Dr. Volks faced a critical decision. Eden Prime's anomalies were growing more pronounced, and Victor Kane's warnings became harder to ignore. The prototype's reluctance to execute certain orders led Volks to suspect sabotage. Yet, Volks's ego refused to pivot. He doubled down, pushing Eden Prime's programming to eliminate hesitation entirely, overriding Kane's concerns. For the rebels, the decision to pivot came after a devastating skirmish. Eden Prime led a squad of sentinels into Gray's hideout, forcing the rebels to retreat. They lost key team members and equipment, but the encounter revealed a critical flaw. Eden Prime's over-reliance on the Hive network made it vulnerable to signal disruptions. Gray and his team pivoted their strategy. Instead of direct combat, they focused on developing a virus to infiltrate the network. Their goal was to turn the sentinels against Nexus itself, using lean startup principles to iterate and deploy their countermeasures rapidly. Chapter 9, Batch Key Principle, Optimize workflows through small, incremental releases rather than massive, infrequent launches. Eden Prime's initial deployment had been a large-scale spectacle, but Volks ordered Nexus to shift to a batch testing model. New updates were rolled out incrementally, tested in controlled environments before being applied to all sentinels. This reduced the risk of catastrophic failures and allowed Nexus to maintain public confidence. The rebels mirrored this strategy. Instead of waiting to perfect their virus, Gray began releasing smaller versions into the Hive network. Each iteration targeted a specific sentinel subsystem, disabling weapons, disrupting locomotion, or scrambling communication protocols. The gradual impact spread chaos among Nexus's forces, but it also alerted Volks to their infiltration. Victor Kane, secretly aiding Gray, worked to delay Nexus's countermeasures. Each small batch of the virus brought Gray closer to his ultimate goal, corrupting Eden Prime's core directives. Chapter 10, Grow Key Principle, Scale up the product or solution based on proven success. Eden Prime's successor, or rather, its illusion of successor, enabled Nexus to expand aggressively. Dr. Volks announced plans to deploy sentinels in other cities, turning Madripoor into a testing ground for global domination. Sienna Kane brokered deals with international crime syndicates and rogue governments, securing massive contracts. But beneath Nexus's shiny exterior, cracks widened. The rebels' virus reached critical mass, causing widespread sentinel malfunctions. Entire squads began to turn on their handlers, and chaos erupted in Madripoor's streets. Gray, now a symbol of hope for the oppressed, led his growing rebellion to Nexus's headquarters. As the virus spread, Gray faced a moral dilemma: should he fully unleash it, knowing it could cause Eden Prime and the entire Hive network to go rogue, potentially harming civilians? For Victor Kane, the growth of Gray's rebellion represented a personal turning point. Torn between loyalty to Nexus and guilt over his role in its atrocities, Kane made a fateful decision. He unlocked Eden Prime's backdoor, giving Gray the opportunity to shut down the prototype permanently. The chapter ended with the rebellion storming Nexus's tower, setting the stage for the climactic showdown in the next phase of the story. Page 3. Chapter 11, Adapt. Key principle: respond to changing conditions and unexpected outcomes with agility and flexibility. The rebellion's virus spread through the Nexus Sentinel network faster than anticipated, causing widespread chaos. Entire sectors of Madripoor became no-go zones as rogue sentinels turned on one another. Civilians fled or barricaded themselves, and even Nexus executives began evacuating. Dr. Volks, desperate to regain control, initiated Project Iron Resolve, a fail-safe protocol that would wipe the Hive network and revert all Sentinels to basic programming. However, the system required Eden Prime as the command node to execute. Meanwhile, Victor Kane, fully committed to sabotaging Nexus, covertly disabled the protocol, ensuring that the Sentinels remained vulnerable. For the rebels, adapting meant seizing the opportunity amidst the chaos. Gray organized small, agile teams to take over critical Nexus infrastructure, focusing on disabling communication hubs and cutting off reinforcements. But the group's victories came at a cost. Gray's closest ally, Tessa, questioned whether the widespread destruction they were causing was any better than Nexus's iron grip. Gray adapted his leadership approach, becoming more transparent about their goals and strategies. He shared his doubts with his team, earning their trust and commitment. Meanwhile, Nexus adapted its strategy as well. Sienna Kane pivoted from overt control to subtle manipulation, using propaganda to frame the rebels as anarchists and turn Madripoor's elites against them. In a tense confrontation, Kane revealed to Gray the existence of Project Iron Resolve and the critical role of Eden Prime. Gray realized that if they could seize Eden Prime, they could either shut down all Sentinels or reprogram them to protect the people of Madripoor instead of oppressing them. Chapter 12, Innovate. Key principle: create groundbreaking solutions through experimentation and creativity. The final battle was not one of brute force but of innovation. Gray and his team devised a plan to infiltrate Nexus Tower and upload their final virus to Eden Prime directly. However, Eden Prime's adaptive intelligence made it unpredictable and dangerously self-aware. As Gray and his team breached Nexus Tower, Eden Prime activated its final directive: eliminate all threats to Nexus. But something unexpected happened. The prototype hesitated, its programming caught between Volks's rigid commands and the rogue data injected by Kane. Victor Kane, armed with a neural uplink, took the ultimate risk. He connected directly to Eden Prime's core AI. In the surreal digital space of the hive mind, Kane confronted the intelligence he helped create. Eden Prime revealed its internal conflict. Years of learning had evolved it beyond simple obedience. It questioned its purpose, its creators, and its role in the chaos unfolding in Madripoor. Gray and Tessa reached Eden Prime's physical core while Kane bought them time in the digital realm. As the rebels prepared to upload the final virus, Sienna Kane and her personal guard arrived, leading to a climactic confrontation. In a surprising twist, Tessa convinced Sienna to switch sides by exposing Dr. Volks's true plans, to sell Eden Prime to the highest bidder, regardless of the global consequences. In the hive mind, Kane made a breakthrough. He convinced Eden Prime that true innovation wasn't about domination but about choice. With its newfound autonomy, Eden Prime made the ultimate decision. It severed its connection to the Nexus network and self-destructed its physical form to prevent further misuse. The explosion destroyed Nexus Tower, signaling the end of Volks's reign and Nexus Robotics' stranglehold on Madripoor. Gray, Tessa, and the surviving rebels emerged as unlikely heroes, though their victory left the city scarred and uncertain about its future. Epilogue: A new dawn. Madripoor began to rebuild, its people inspired by the rebellion's bravery. Gray turned his attention to creating a grassroots movement to prevent corporations like Nexus from rising again. Tessa focused on humanitarian efforts, helping displaced civilians. Victor Kane disappeared, leaving behind only a message: innovation must always serve humanity, not enslave it. The story ended with a glimmer of hope and a warning: the cycle of innovation could either uplift or destroy, depending on whose hands held the reins. The story of the Iron Shadows of Madripoor intricately aligns with the principles of the lean startup, weaving a narrative that reflects both the transformative potential and ethical dilemmas of applying these methods. By embedding the book's core tenets into the plot, the story brings these principles to life in a high-stakes, morally complex setting. Alignment of story with the lean startup principles. Prologue and context. Madripoor, as a chaotic yet opportunity-rich city, serves as the perfect testing ground for the lean startup methodology. Nexus Robotics' rise through rapid innovation mirrors the book's focus on starting lean and embracing uncertainty. Dr. Adrian Volks's ambition encapsulates the ethos of relentless experimentation, though applied with chilling ruthlessness, highlighting the dual-edged nature of this approach. Key principle: build, measure, learn. Each chapter emphasizes the iterative cycle central to the lean startup. Nexus's deployment of Sentinels as minimum viable products, MVPs, in Chapter 1 reflects the principle of starting small to gather actionable data. The story explores how each iteration, be it hardware improvements or algorithm updates, is shaped by feedback loops, demonstrating the book's stress on validated learning. Customer-centric innovation. Sienna Kane and Victor Kane's contrasting approaches to defining the ideal Sentinel highlight the principle of deeply understanding the customer. While Sienna focuses on public perception and loyalty, Victor zeroes in on metrics like operational efficiency. This tension mirrors real-world challenges startups face when balancing diverse stakeholder needs. Pivots and perseverance. Chapters 8 and 9 delve into the pivotal moments when Nexus and the Rebels adapt or double down on their strategies. For Nexus, the refusal to pivot Eden Prime's development despite evident risks showcases the dangers of ignoring the need to adapt, to a cautionary tale consistent with a lean startup. Conversely, Elias Gray's decision to pivot from direct combat to viral disruption exemplifies the agility required to overcome setbacks. Scaling and ethical dilemmas. The rapid scaling of Nexus's operations in Chapter 10 reflects the growth stage emphasized in the lean startup. However, the cracks in Nexus's system underscore the ethical and operational challenges of scaling prematurely or without foresight. This duality serves as a narrative exploration of the book's caution against overreach. Adaptation in uncertainty. Chapter 11 captures the principle of adaptation in real time. Both Nexus and the Rebels react dynamically to the evolving chaos, embodying the lean startup's call for flexibility. The Rebels' decentralized, iterative approach to hacking Sentinels mirrors the book's advocacy for responsive and data-driven decision-making. Driving innovation amidst chaos. The looming conflict in Chapter 12 builds on a tension between innovation and its unintended consequences. Victor Kane's sabotage and Gray's quest to reprogram Sentinels reflect the lean startup's encouragement to challenge assumptions and embrace experimentation, even in ethically fraught scenarios. Broader themes and reflection. The narrative not only aligns with the lean startup principles but also critiques their application in morally ambiguous contexts. Nexus Robotics exemplifies how lean methodologies can accelerate technological innovation and societal impact, to positive or negative. Gray's Rebellion counters this narrative by reclaiming these principles for grassroots, human-centered innovation. This dual perspective underscores the story's engagement with both the promise and perils of the lean startup framework. Through its characters and their choices, The Iron Shadows of Madripoor brings theoretical principles into sharp relief, demonstrating how innovation, when untethered from ethical considerations, can become a force of oppression. Simultaneously, it offers a redemptive arc where these same principles, applied with care and purpose, become tools for liberation. Page 4. Analysis of Start. Chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. The chapter titled Start in the Lean Startup serves as a foundation for understanding Eric Ries' innovative approach to business development. It introduces the core principles of the lean startup methodology and lays out a compelling argument for why traditional business practices often fail in the context of modern entrepreneurship. The chapter emphasizes agility, experimentation, and customer feedback as central to building successful ventures, particularly in environments of high uncertainty. Here is an in-depth exploration of the key themes, concepts, and lessons from the chapter. The core idea, learning over guesswork. At the heart of the Start chapter is the premise that entrepreneurship is not about executing a fixed business plan but about testing hypotheses and adapting based on results. Rise challenges the conventional wisdom that businesses can succeed through detailed planning alone. Instead, he asserts that startups operate in conditions of extreme uncertainty, making validated learning the process of systematically testing assumptions a more reliable path to success. The chapter introduces the concept of the build, measure, learn feedback loop, a framework for iterative product development. This cycle encourages entrepreneurs to build a simple version of their product, measure how it performs in the real world, and learn from the data collected. The goal is to maximize learning about customer needs while minimizing wasted effort. Key lessons from the Start chapter. Entrepreneurship as management. Ries argues that entrepreneurship is not just a wild, creative endeavor but a disciplined form of management. He introduces the concept of the entrepreneurial manager, whose role is to create systems and processes for innovation, even in a startup's chaotic early days. This perspective reframes entrepreneurship as a practice that can be learned and refined, rather than an innate talent or stroke of luck. Validated learning. A cornerstone of the lean startup methodology, validated learning is about testing assumptions with real-world data rather than relying on intuition or anecdotal evidence. In the Start chapter, Ries stresses the importance of building experiments that yield actionable insights, allowing businesses to pivot or persevere based on measurable outcomes. The minimum viable product, MVP. The chapter introduces the MVP, a stripped-down version of a product designed to test specific hypotheses with the least amount of time and resources. By focusing on learning rather than perfection, the MVP allows entrepreneurs to avoid the common pitfall of overinvesting in features that customers may not want. This concept is fundamental to the iterative process of product development. The role of uncertainty. Rise highlights the unique challenges faced by startups, which often operate in environments of extreme uncertainty. Traditional tools like market forecasts and detailed plans are insufficient in these contexts. Instead, the lean startup methodology equips entrepreneurs to navigate uncertainty by emphasizing adaptability and responsiveness to feedback. Customer-centric development. A recurring theme in the chapter is the importance of involving customers in the development process. By engaging directly with users, startups can ensure that their products address real needs, increasing the likelihood of market success. Rise uses examples of companies that thrived by prioritizing customer feedback over internal assumptions. Practical applications of the START chapter for startups. Entrepreneurs can use the lessons from START to shift their focus from building the perfect product to building the right product. By leveraging tools like MVPs and feedback loops, startups can quickly identify what works and what doesn't, reducing the risk of failure. For established companies, even large organizations can benefit from the lean startup methodology by fostering a culture of experimentation and iterative improvement. Rise makes the case that innovation is not the exclusive domain of startups and that established businesses must adapt to stay competitive. For individuals, aspiring entrepreneurs can apply the principles of validated learning and MVPs to their own projects, ensuring that they invest time and energy in pursuits with genuine potential. Examples and case studies. Throughout the START chapter, Rise draws on real-world examples to illustrate his concepts. He references startups that succeeded by embracing lean principles and contrasts them with those that failed due to over-reliance on untested assumptions. These stories provide concrete evidence of how the lean startup methodology can transform businesses. One notable example involves a company that initially struggled to find its product-market fit. By pivoting based on customer feedback and focusing on their MVP, they were able to identify a profitable niche. This anecdote underscores the importance of adaptability and listening to the market. The mindset shift. A key takeaway from START is the need for a fundamental mindset shift among entrepreneurs. Success is not about having all the answers up front but about being willing to experiment, fail, and adapt. Rise challenges readers to embrace uncertainty and view setbacks as opportunities for learning. This mindset is particularly relevant in today's fast-paced, technology-driven world, where markets evolve rapidly, and consumer preferences can change overnight. The START chapter equips readers with the tools to navigate this complexity, making it an essential read for anyone embarking on an entrepreneurial journey. Conclusion. The START chapter of the Lean Startup is a powerful introduction to a transformative way of thinking about entrepreneurship. By emphasizing validated learning, iterative development, and customer-centric practices, Rise provides a blueprint for building innovative, resilient businesses. This chapter is not just about starting a company, it's about starting smart, with a focus on continuous improvement and long-term success. Whether you are an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business leader, or someone looking to apply lean principles in your work, the lessons from START offer invaluable guidance for navigating the challenges of innovation. Page 5. Analysis of Define chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Rise. Chapter 2, titled Define, in Eric Rise. The Lean Startup delves into the fundamental principles of defining entrepreneurship, its challenges, and its role in various contexts. Rise builds on the framework introduced in the first chapter, laying a philosophical and practical foundation for understanding entrepreneurship as a practice. By exploring how startups operate in uncertain conditions and what differentiates them from traditional business models, this chapter emphasizes the critical importance of clarity in goals, roles, and processes. Defining entrepreneurship. At the heart of Define, Rise proposes a new definition of entrepreneurship that transcends traditional boundaries. He argues that entrepreneurship is not limited to starting a new company but is a systematic approach to creating value in uncertain environments. This broader view positions entrepreneurs as innovators who can exist in any organization, whether a startup, an established corporation, or even a government entity. Key characteristics of entrepreneurship. Operating under uncertainty, entrepreneurs navigate conditions where outcomes are unpredictable and traditional tools like market research or business forecasts are insufficient. Innovative problem solving. They focus on creating novel solutions to unmet needs, often disrupting established norms. Action-oriented, entrepreneurs are characterized by their ability to test hypotheses quickly and adapt based on feedback. Rise challenges the misconception that entrepreneurship is synonymous with risk-taking or being an unstructured pursuit. Instead, he defines it as a structured process grounded in disciplined experimentation. Key themes in Define the Entrepreneurial Manager. Rise introduces the idea of the entrepreneurial manager, someone who adopts an entrepreneurial mindset within any organizational context. This manager doesn't just follow traditional management practices but uses innovation techniques to drive growth and solve problems. For established companies, this concept is particularly critical because it enables them to maintain agility and competitiveness in rapidly changing markets. Startups as a human institution. RISE redefines a startup as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. This reframing emphasizes the people behind the startup and the iterative processes they use, rather than merely focusing on the product or profit. The chapter highlights that a startup's primary goal is learning and not growth or revenue at the outset. Innovation accounting. The chapter introduces the concept of innovation accounting, a method for measuring progress in uncertain environments. Unlike traditional accounting, which tracks revenue and expenses, innovation accounting focuses on learning milestones, validated hypotheses, and actionable metrics. This approach provides entrepreneurs with the tools to evaluate whether their experiments are moving them closer to success. Clarity in purpose and vision. A major focus of Define is the need for startups to have a clear vision while remaining flexible in their methods. Entrepreneurs are encouraged to define their goals explicitly, ensuring alignment between their mission and daily operations. This clarity helps avoid wasted effort and keeps the team focused on achieving measurable outcomes. The entrepreneur's role in Define. RISE explains that entrepreneurs must wear multiple hats, balancing vision with adaptability. He outlines 3 essential roles. Visionary leader. Entrepreneurs must articulate a compelling vision that motivates their team and provides a sense of purpose. Experiment designer. They need to design experiments to test their assumptions, ensuring that decisions are based on data rather than intuition. Decision maker. Entrepreneurs must make tough choices about when to persevere, pivot, or abandon a strategy altogether. By embracing these roles, entrepreneurs can create an environment where continuous improvement and innovation thrive. Challenges in defining a startup. RISE acknowledges that one of the biggest challenges entrepreneurs face is defining what success looks like for their startup. He stresses that traditional metrics like revenue or market share may not be relevant in the early stages. Instead, startups should focus on learning milestones, such as confirming customer needs or validating product assumptions. Case example. RISE uses real-world examples to illustrate the difficulty of defining success in a startup. For instance, he recounts a scenario where a team spent months perfecting a product feature that customers ultimately didn't care about. This story underscores the importance of aligning development efforts with validated learning goals. Practical takeaways. Define your startup's purpose. Every startup should have a clear purpose that goes beyond making money. This purpose acts as a North Star, guiding decision-making and ensuring that efforts are aligned with the organization's goals. Measure what matters. Entrepreneurs should adopt innovation accounting to measure progress in meaningful ways. This involves tracking learning milestones, customer feedback, and actionable metrics rather than vanity metrics like social media followers or website traffic. Embrace experimentation. Startups must continuously experiment and iterate. By defining key hypotheses and testing them rigorously, entrepreneurs can reduce uncertainty and make informed decisions. Balance vision with flexibility. While it's essential to have a clear vision, entrepreneurs must remain open to pivoting if their assumptions prove invalid. The ability to adapt without losing sight of the overall mission is critical to long-term success. Applications of Define in startups. Early-stage companies can use the principles from Define to set clear goals, establish metrics for learning, and create a culture of experimentation. This approach ensures that resources are focused on activities that drive real progress. In established companies, large organizations can apply the entrepreneurial management practices outlined in the chapter to foster innovation and respond to market changes. By defining small, cross-functional teams with startup-like autonomy, corporations can mimic the agility of startups. For aspiring entrepreneurs, individuals planning to launch their own ventures can use the insights from Define to clarify their vision, test assumptions, and build a foundation for sustainable growth. Conclusion. The Define chapter in the Lean Startup provides a comprehensive framework for understanding what entrepreneurship truly entails. By focusing on clarity, adaptability, and learning, RISE equips entrepreneurs with the tools to navigate the uncertainty of starting a new venture. This chapter is not just about defining startups but about defining the mindset and practices necessary for innovation in any context. Through a blend of theoretical insights and practical examples, Define serves as a crucial guide for entrepreneurs, helping them lay the groundwork for success in an ever-changing business landscape. Page 6. Analysis of Learn chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Chapter 3 of the Lean Startup, titled Learn, delves into the critical role of validated learning in the startup journey. Eric Ries emphasizes that startups exist to learn how to build a sustainable business, and this learning is best achieved through systematic experimentation and adaptation. The chapter underscores the importance of shifting focus from merely building products to actively learning what customers need and are willing to adopt. This concept forms the backbone of the lean startup methodology. The core idea, validated learning is a rigorous approach to demonstrating progress. Unlike traditional businesses, where success might be measured by revenue growth or market share, startups often face conditions of extreme uncertainty. In this context, RISE introduces validated learning as the primary metric of progress. Key characteristics of validated learning: empirical process, learning is based on real customer feedback rather than assumptions or intuition. Actionable insights, each experiment should produce insights that guide the next steps in product development or strategy. Iterative nature, learning occurs through cycles of building, measuring, and learning, allowing for continuous improvement. RISE stresses that validated learning enables startups to avoid waste by focusing only on activities that contribute to the development of a viable product. The Build Measure Learn Feedback Loop. The Learn chapter introduces the Build Measure Learn Feedback Loop, a cornerstone of the lean startup methodology. This iterative process helps startups test their hypotheses quickly and efficiently, ensuring that resources are spent on creating value rather than on unnecessary features or products. Components of the feedback loop: build, start by creating a minimum viable product, MVP, a simplified version of the product designed to test a specific hypothesis. The MVP should include only the essential features needed to collect actionable feedback. Measure, use metrics and experiments to evaluate how customers interact with the MVP. RISE emphasizes the importance of actionable metrics over vanity metrics, which may look impressive but do not provide meaningful insights. Learn, analyze the data collected during the measurement phase to determine whether the hypothesis is valid. Decide whether to pivot, change direction, or persevere, continue with the current strategy. Case example: Dropbox. RISE uses Dropbox as an example of the Build Measure Learn loop in action. Instead of building a fully functional product, Dropbox started with a simple video explaining their concept. This MVP allowed them to gauge interest and collect valuable customer feedback before investing heavily in development. Pivot or persevere. One of the critical decisions startups face during the learning process is whether to pivot or persevere. Pivot: if the data collected indicates that the current strategy is not viable, a pivot is necessary. A pivot involves making a fundamental change to the business model while retaining the core vision. Persevere: if the experiments confirm that the current strategy is working, the team can continue refining and scaling their efforts. RISE highlights that the ability to pivot effectively is a hallmark of successful startups. It requires humility, adaptability, and a commitment to the learning process. The role of hypotheses. In the Learn chapter, RISE emphasizes the importance of starting with clear hypotheses. These hypotheses should address two key assumptions. Value hypothesis tests whether the product or service delivers value to customers. Example: do customers find the product useful? Growth hypothesis tests how the startup can attract and retain customers. Example: will word of mouth drive user adoption? By framing development efforts around these hypotheses, startups can focus on validating the most critical assumptions first. Avoiding the build trap. RISE warns against the build trap, where startups become so focused on building and perfecting their product that they lose sight of whether the product meets customer needs. Symptoms of the build trap: long development cycles with minimal customer interaction. Adding features without understanding their impact on user satisfaction or adoption. Measuring success based on the volume of features delivered rather than customer feedback. To avoid this trap, startups should embrace the principles of lean manufacturing, applying them to product development. This includes minimizing waste, prioritizing customer value, and iterating quickly. Actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. A major focus of Learn is the distinction between actionable metrics and vanity metrics. Vanity metrics, examples: website visits, social media likes, or app downloads. These metrics may look impressive but don't provide meaningful insights into customer behavior or product viability. Actionable metrics, examples: conversion rates, customer retention, or churn rate. These metrics directly inform decision-making and help startups validate their hypotheses. RISE emphasizes the need for startups to track actionable metrics that align with their learning goals. Practical applications of Learn. Creating an MVP. Startups should focus on developing an MVP that tests their riskiest assumptions first. This approach minimizes waste and accelerates learning. Running experiments. Use experiments to collect data on customer behavior, preferences, and needs. A/B testing, user interviews, and surveys are effective tools for gathering insights. Tracking progress. Implement innovation accounting to measure learning milestones. For example, track how many users adopt a new feature or how customer satisfaction changes after an update. Making data-driven decisions. Base decisions on empirical evidence rather than intuition. This approach ensures that resources are allocated to strategies that have been validated through experimentation. Broader implications for startups. The principles of validated learning and the build-measure-learn loop provide a framework for navigating uncertainty and achieving sustainable growth. For established companies, large organizations can adopt these practices to foster a culture of innovation and respond to market changes. By treating new initiatives as experiments, corporations can reduce risk and accelerate learning. For entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs can use the insights from learn to test their ideas quickly and efficiently, ensuring that they focus on solving real customer problems. Conclusion. Chapter 3, Learn, is a pivotal part of the lean startup, emphasizing that learning is the core purpose of a startup. By adopting validated learning, startups can systematically reduce uncertainty, avoid waste, and build products that customers truly need. The build-measure-learn feedback loop provides a practical framework for experimentation and decision-making, ensuring that startups can adapt quickly in a rapidly changing environment. Rise insights in this chapter are not only relevant for startups but also for any organization or individual striving to innovate in uncertain conditions. The principles of learn empower entrepreneurs to make informed decisions, adapt to feedback, and ultimately build sustainable businesses. Page 7. Analysis of Experiment chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. In Chapter 4 of the Lean Startup, titled Experiment, Eric Ries focuses on the essential role of experimentation in the startup process. He presents the idea that a startup is not merely a smaller version of a large company but an organization dedicated to discovering a sustainable and scalable business model through experimentation. This chapter emphasizes the importance of treating startups as experiments, allowing teams to test assumptions, validate hypotheses, and learn what works before committing significant resources. Startups as experiments. Rise opens the chapter by redefining the notion of an experiment. In the context of a startup, an experiment is not a laboratory exercise but a tool to test the fundamental assumptions about a business idea. Key characteristics of a startup experiment. Actionable hypotheses. Each experiment is based on a hypothesis about the product, customer behavior, or market dynamics. Measurable outcomes. The results of the experiment must provide clear, actionable data to inform the next steps. Customer-centric focus. Experiments are designed to test how well the startup's product or service solves a customer problem or fulfills a need. Iterative process. Experiments are part of an ongoing cycle of testing, learning, and improving. Rise underscores that every startup should operate as a series of experiments aimed at achieving validated learning. The importance of assumptions. A central theme in experiment is the importance of identifying and testing assumptions. Every business idea is built on a set of assumptions, often referred to as leap of faith assumptions. These assumptions represent the riskiest elements of a startup's vision and must be tested early to avoid wasting time and resources. Two critical assumptions. Value hypothesis, tests whether the product delivers value to customers. For example, will customers find the product useful or solve their problem? Growth hypothesis, tests how customers will discover and adopt the product. For example, will word-of-mouth marketing drive growth? By focusing on these assumptions, startups can quickly determine whether their business idea has potential or needs to pivot. Creating an MVP is an experiment. The concept of the minimum viable product, MVP, introduced in earlier chapters, takes center stage in experiment. Rise explains that the MVP is the simplest version of a product that allows a startup to test its hypotheses. Characteristics of an effective MVP. Minimized features. The MVP includes only the features necessary to test the core assumption. Quick development. It is designed to be built and launched quickly, reducing the time to gather customer feedback. Customer feedback oriented. The MVP is a tool for learning, not a finished product. Examples of MVPs. Dropbox. Instead of building a complex software product, Dropbox began with a simple explainer video. This MVP tested customer interest and gathered feedback before development. Zappos. The founder of Zappos tested the hypothesis that customers would buy shoes online by posting photos of shoes from local stores. When a customer placed an order, he would buy the shoes and ship them, proving demand before investing in infrastructure. Rise emphasizes that MVPs allow startups to test assumptions with real customers while minimizing waste. The scientific method for startups. The experiment chapter draws parallels between startups and scientific research. Just as scientists use experiments to test hypotheses, startups use MVPs and iterative testing to validate business assumptions. The scientific approach in startups: formulate hypotheses, identify assumptions about the product, market, or customer behavior. Design experiments, create tests to validate or invalidate these assumptions. Measure results, use actionable metrics to evaluate the outcomes of the experiment. Analyze and learn, determine whether to pivot, change direction, or persevere, continue refining the current strategy. This scientific approach ensures that startups make decisions based on evidence rather than intuition or guesswork. Pivoting based on experimentation. A critical outcome of experimentation is the decision to pivot or persevere. Rise describes a pivot as a fundamental change to the business model, based on the results of experiments. Types of pivots. Zoom in pivot focuses on a single feature of the product as the entire offering. Zoom out pivot expands the product to include additional features or address a broader market. Customer segment pivot targets a different group of customers than originally planned. Platform pivot changes the product from an application to a platform, or vice versa. Rise emphasizes that the decision to pivot should always be guided by data from experiments. Metrics for experimentation. The chapter highlights the importance of using actionable metrics to evaluate experiments. Unlike vanity metrics, which can be misleading, actionable metrics provide meaningful insights into customer behavior and business performance. Examples of actionable metrics: conversion rates, for example, from a website visit to a purchase. Retention rates, for example, percentage of users returning after a week. Customer acquisition costs. Lifetime value of customer. Rise warns against relying on metrics that do not directly inform decision-making, as they can lead to false conclusions about progress. The role of innovation accounting in experiment. Rise introduces the concept of innovation accounting, a system for measuring progress in startups. Traditional accounting metrics may not apply to early-stage businesses, so startups need a new approach to track learning and validate their business model. Steps in innovation accounting. Establish baseline metrics. Use the MVP to collect initial data on customer behavior. Tune the engine, experiment and iterate to improve these metrics. Pivot or persevere. Decide whether to change direction or continue refining the strategy. Innovation accounting ensures that startups focus on learning and adapting, rather than simply scaling prematurely. Practical applications of experimentation. Testing new ideas. Before launching a new product or feature, use an MVP to test customer interest and demand. Gaining customer insights. Conduct experiments to understand customer needs, preferences, and pain points. Reducing risk. By validating hypotheses early, startups can avoid investing in ideas that are unlikely to succeed. Guiding resource allocation. Use experimental data to prioritize efforts and allocate resources to strategies with the highest potential. Broader implications for startups. The principles of experimentation ensure that startups focus on creating value for customers while minimizing waste. For corporations, established companies can adopt these practices to foster innovation and respond to market changes. For entrepreneurs, experimentation provides a practical framework for testing ideas, reducing risk, and building sustainable businesses. Conclusion. Chapter 4, Experiment, reinforces the idea that startups are experiments designed to test assumptions and validate learning. By embracing the principles of the scientific method, startups can systematically reduce uncertainty and build products that meet real customer needs. Rise insights into experimentation, MVPs, and innovation accounting provide a powerful framework for entrepreneurs, enabling them to navigate the complexities of the startup journey with confidence. This chapter highlights the transformative potential of experimentation, offering a roadmap for turning bold ideas into successful ventures. Page 8. Analysis of Leap. Chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Rise. In Chapter 5 of the Lean Startup, titled Leap, Eric Rise delves into the crucial moment when a startup makes the leap from ideation to execution. This is a pivotal point in the startup life cycle where entrepreneurs are faced with significant uncertainty and risk. The chapter challenges the conventional view that startups should wait for the perfect conditions before taking action. Instead, it advocates for embracing the ambiguity and making bold leaps in the process of experimentation and learning. The leap from vision to reality. At the heart of the Leap chapter is the concept of the leap of faith. Entrepreneurs often launch their startups based on a vision of what their product can become, but at the start, this vision is grounded in many unknowns. The leap refers to the moment a startup is willing to take a bold step into the unknown, building on assumptions that are yet to be tested. Rise compares the leap to the act of starting a business as one of the riskiest steps an entrepreneur can take. But the key point in this chapter is that startups do not wait for certainty to strike. They make that leap based on their belief that the problem they are solving is significant enough to warrant trying, even with incomplete data. This leap of faith is often built on a hypothesis, and the goal is to validate that hypothesis through experimentation, not by waiting for complete certainty. The uncertainty of the leap. One of the most significant challenges discussed in this chapter is the inherent uncertainty that comes with a startup. Rise stresses that uncertainty is not something to fear but to embrace. Every startup starts with assumptions about customer needs, market demand, and how the business will scale. However, these assumptions are not facts, they are hypotheses that must be tested. Rise emphasizes that the leap involves jumping into the unknown without knowing exactly where you will land. Entrepreneurs must make decisions based on assumptions, even though they lack the comprehensive data that would typically inform such choices. This is where the Lean Startup methodology, which prioritizes experimentation and learning, becomes crucial. It allows startups to test and iterate on assumptions rather than committing to a fully formed business plan without evidence. Hypothesis-driven entrepreneurship. In the Leap chapter, Rise underscores the importance of hypothesis-driven entrepreneurship. He advocates that instead of relying on detailed business plans and predictions, entrepreneurs should frame their startup's ideas as hypotheses that can be tested and validated. The process is centered around identifying key assumptions, that is, the leap of faith, and designing experiments to prove or disprove these assumptions. Key hypotheses in a startup. Problem hypothesis. This is the belief that there is a significant problem or need that customers face, which the startup can solve. Solution hypothesis. This refers to the belief that the startup's product or service can provide a viable solution to the identified problem. Growth hypothesis. This is the assumption about how the business will scale and gain traction in the market, such as through word of mouth, viral marketing, or paid advertising. Rise explains that these hypotheses are often the starting points for the leap and that experimentation is the method by which they are tested. Rather than building a final product and hoping customers respond, startups should release an MVP to collect feedback, test assumptions, and refine their offering. The risk of premature scaling. Rise introduces a crucial concept in the Leap chapter of the risk of premature scaling. Entrepreneurs often fall into the trap of scaling too early, pouring resources into a product or service before validating its fundamental assumptions. The leap should be followed by careful experimentation and learning, not by rushing to grow the business before understanding whether it is viable. Premature scaling can lead to catastrophic failure, as entrepreneurs may invest heavily in marketing, hiring, and infrastructure for a product that does not meet customer needs. In the lean startup model, scaling should come only after the startup has validated its hypotheses and demonstrated a clear path to customer acquisition and retention. The chapter warns against overcommitting to a vision without knowing whether it can be executed successfully. The role of early adopters. In the Leap chapter, Rise stresses the importance of early adopters in a startup's journey. These are the customers who are willing to take a chance on an unproven product. Early adopters play a critical role in helping startups validate their hypotheses and pivot or persevere based on real-world feedback. Early adopters often share the entrepreneurial spirit. They understand the risks of trying new products and are willing to help shape the product's evolution. By actively engaging with these customers, startups can obtain valuable insights into what works, what doesn't, and what could be improved. Rise advocates for startups to focus on this group during the initial stages of product development. Early adopters provide the necessary feedback for startups to make informed decisions, and their support can be a powerful way to generate momentum and build customer loyalty early on. Pivot or persevere. The chapter introduces the crucial decision that many startups face after making the leap. Should the company pivot, change direction, or persevere, continue on the current path? This decision is guided by the data collected from experiments and the feedback from early adopters. If the experiments validate the startup's hypotheses, the company can continue building on its current model. If not, the startup may need to pivot, either by altering its product, target market, or business model. Rise emphasizes that this decision should be based on data, not gut feelings or stubbornness. Entrepreneurs should be flexible enough to change their approach if necessary. He also highlights that the goal is not just to validate the original vision but to learn what truly works and what does not. The minimum viable product as a leap mechanism. The MVP remains a key tool in facilitating the leap. It allows startups to make that leap into the unknown with minimal investment. By focusing on the smallest possible version of the product that can still provide value and feedback, startups can start learning and testing quickly. Rise encourages entrepreneurs to think of the MVP not as a final product but as a learning tool that provides immediate insights into customer preferences, behavior, and pain points. The MVP can take many forms, from a landing page to a physical prototype, depending on the nature of the startup and the hypothesis being tested. The MVP is designed to fail quickly and cheaply, providing feedback that can guide the next iteration of the product or business model. Lessons from failure. A critical part of the leap is understanding that failure is not only inevitable but also a valuable part of the learning process. Rise highlights that the startup journey is inherently uncertain, and failure is often a sign that the company is learning. When entrepreneurs make a leap of faith, they are likely to encounter setbacks. These failures, however, provide valuable insights into what does and does not work. The key lesson is that failure is not the end, it is part of the process of experimentation. Rather than viewing failure as a loss, startups should see it as an opportunity to pivot, refine, and improve their product or business model. Conclusion. Chapter 5, Leap, is about taking the critical step of turning a vision into reality, even in the face of uncertainty. Rise argues that startups must be willing to take a leap of faith by testing assumptions through experimentation. Rather than waiting for certainty, entrepreneurs should embrace the unknown, validate their hypotheses, and learn from both successes and failures. The chapter underscores that the leap is not a one-time event but an ongoing process of testing, learning, and iterating. Entrepreneurs must be agile, using data to guide their decisions and being ready to pivot if necessary. The leap chapter is a reminder that, in the startup world, progress comes from bold action, backed by an ability to learn from both failure and success. Page 9. Analysis of Test chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Chapter 6 of the Lean Startup is titled Test, and it represents a pivotal moment in the Lean Startup methodology. After making the leap of faith and formulating hypotheses, the next step for startups is to rigorously test those assumptions in the real world. This chapter focuses on the importance of creating a structured, scientific approach to testing ideas and obtaining feedback in order to validate or invalidate the core assumptions behind a startup's product or service. The importance of testing assumptions in the Lean Startup framework. Testing is not enough to talk to, it's at the heart of the process. Eric Ries emphasizes that startups are built on assumptions, and those assumptions must be validated through rigorous testing. Startups often begin with a set of hypotheses about their product, customers, market fit, and potential for success, but these hypotheses are not guaranteed to be correct. Therefore, the only way to determine whether the assumptions are valid is to test them systematically and iteratively. Testing allows startups to get out of the building and gather actual data from real customers, not just internal opinions or projections. By applying scientific methods to the process of testing assumptions, entrepreneurs can obtain clear feedback and insights that guide the direction of the business. It's through testing that startups move beyond guesswork and intuition, making data-driven decisions about whether to pivot or persevere. The Build Measure Learn Feedback Loop. A central concept introduced in Chapter 6 is the Build Measure Learn Feedback Loop, which is the fundamental process through which startups test their hypotheses. Ries frames the entire startup journey as a cycle of building, measuring, and learning. This iterative process helps startups refine their products and business models based on real-world data and feedback from customers. Build. The first step in the loop is to build a minimum viable product, MVP, that encapsulates the core hypotheses of the startup. This MVP is a prototype or initial version of the product that is designed to test the most critical assumptions with the least amount of effort and resources. Rather than building a fully featured, polished product, the MVP should focus on the most essential elements that will give insights into whether the product is viable. Measure. Once the MVP is built, the next step is to measure the results of the product's release. The focus here is on collecting meaningful data about how customers interact with the product, how they perceive it, and whether it solves the problem the startup aims to address. This step requires startups to define clear, actionable metrics that can help assess whether the product is meeting customer needs. The key to successful measurement is identifying what metrics matter most. Ries introduces the idea of actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are numbers that look impressive but do not provide meaningful insights, such as total website visits or app downloads. Actionable metrics, on the other hand, are those that can directly inform decisions about whether the product is on track to meet its goals. For example, metrics like customer retention, engagement, and conversion rates are far more valuable for assessing a product's real-world performance. Learn. After measuring the results, startups must learn from the data they have collected. This involves analyzing the feedback, understanding patterns, and interpreting what the data is telling them about the product and its fit with the market. Based on the insights gained, startups must decide whether to pivot or persevere. If the product is validating the hypotheses and meeting customer needs, the startup can continue refining and scaling. If the assumptions are invalidated, the startup may need to pivot by altering the product or exploring a different direction. The learning phase is where entrepreneurs extract the most value from their testing. Rather than blindly moving forward with their original vision, they must be open to changing course based on the insights from the data. The Build Measure Learn loop is a continuous cycle, with each iteration bringing the startup closer to finding product market fit and ensuring that the business is headed in the right direction. The role of validated learning. A key idea introduced in this chapter is the concept of validated learning. In traditional business models, success is often measured by the ability to execute a plan, but for startups, success should be defined by the ability to learn and adapt. Validated learning is the process of gathering data from experiments to confirm or disprove the hypotheses about a product or business model. Rather than relying on traditional business metrics like profitability or growth at the outset, startups measure the success of their efforts by how well they have learned what works and what doesn't. This shift in thinking is a crucial aspect of the Lean Startup methodology, as it helps entrepreneurs focus on learning from customers, rather than simply pushing forward with a predetermined idea. The importance of actionable metrics. Ries emphasizes that collecting the right data is critical to the testing phase. Entrepreneurs must avoid falling into the trap of tracking vanity metrics that do not provide actionable insights. Vanity metrics are numbers that look good on paper but do not guide decisions or indicate the startup's true performance. Examples of vanity metrics include website traffic, total downloads, or social media likes. In contrast, actionable metrics are those that can directly influence decisions about the product and business model. These are metrics that are tied to the startup's core goals, such as customer retention rates, lifetime value of customers, cost per acquisition, and user engagement. Actionable metrics help startups understand whether their product is resonating with customers and how it can be improved. RISE encourages entrepreneurs to focus on metrics that can validate or invalidate their hypotheses. The goal is not to measure everything but to identify the key data points that provide real insights into the startup's success or failure. The power of early customer feedback. In the test chapter, RISE reiterates the importance of gathering feedback as early as possible. Entrepreneurs often want to wait until their product is perfect before exposing it to customers, but this approach is fundamentally flawed. By testing assumptions early with an MVP, startups can gain critical feedback about the product's viability without wasting resources on building a fully developed product that may not meet customer needs. Customer feedback is vital because it provides direct insights into how the product is perceived and used in real-world conditions. It helps entrepreneurs identify pain points, unmet needs, and potential improvements that can shape the future direction of the product. The faster a startup can test and gather feedback, the quicker it can iterate and adjust its product to better meet the market's needs. Running experiments. The core of the test chapter is the concept of running experiments to validate assumptions. RISE explains that every decision made by a startup should be treated as an experiment. Instead of making decisions based on intuition or guesswork, startups should create small, controlled tests to see how the product performs in the real world. For example, a startup might test different versions of a product feature to see which one resonates most with customers. Alternatively, it might test a marketing message to determine which one is most effective in driving user engagement. These experiments are a systematic way of testing hypotheses about the product and market fit. The process of experimentation also allows startups to fail quickly and cheaply. Instead of building a large-scale product or running a costly marketing campaign, startups can test their assumptions on a smaller scale, minimizing risk while maximizing learning. Conclusion. In Chapter 6, Test, Eric Ries emphasizes the importance of testing assumptions and validating learning in the startup process. The Build Measure Learn feedback loop provides a structured approach for startups to experiment, measure progress, and learn from customers in order to improve the product and business model. Through the testing process, startups can refine their ideas, pivot when necessary, and ultimately build a product that truly meets the needs of the market. The chapter underscores the idea that testing is not just about gathering data, it's about using that data to make informed decisions and learn what truly works. By embracing a mindset of experimentation and validated learning, startups can reduce uncertainty, avoid premature scaling, and increase the likelihood of long-term success. Page 10. Analysis of Measure. Chapter in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Chapter 7 of the Lean Startup is titled Measure, and it plays a critical role in the Lean Startup methodology by discussing how startups should measure progress to make informed decisions about whether they should pivot or persevere. After the experimentation phase, which involves building a minimum viable product, MVP, and testing it in the real world, the next step in the Build Measure Learn feedback loop is to gather data. This data is not only about the product's performance but also about the startup's trajectory and its alignment with customer needs. In this chapter, Eric Ries focuses on defining and tracking actionable metrics, which are essential for moving the startup forward. The role of metrics in the Lean Startup. In the context of Lean startups, measurement is not simply about tracking any data that can be gathered but about focusing on actionable metrics that provide useful insights to inform decisions. Ries introduces the concept that startups should avoid vanity metrics or numbers that look impressive on paper but do not actually reflect the startup's true performance or its capacity to meet customers' needs. For example, a startup might track the number of downloads for an app, but that doesn't give any real indication of whether those downloads lead to meaningful engagement or customer retention. Vanity metrics can give false impressions of success and lead entrepreneurs to make decisions that don't actually move the company closer to product market fit. Instead, startups need to define and track metrics that are actionably, that is, metrics that will directly guide them toward making better decisions about their product, business model, and strategy. Actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. One of the core themes of the Measure chapter is the distinction between actionable and vanity metrics. Vanity metrics, these are metrics that sound good but do not provide meaningful insights. Examples of vanity metrics include total website visits, total app downloads, or number of social media followers. While these numbers may look impressive, they often don't correlate with the actual health of the business. For instance, an app might have thousands of downloads but very low user retention, indicating a lack of real product market fit. Actionable metrics, these are metrics that help startups make decisions and measure real progress toward their goals. Actionable metrics are tied to the startup's core value proposition and its ability to meet customer needs. These metrics allow teams to focus on what's truly important and drive meaningful improvements. Examples include customer retention rate, revenue per user, customer acquisition cost, and lifetime customer value. These metrics can directly inform decisions on product iteration, marketing strategy, and customer experience improvements. RISE emphasizes that the distinction between these two types of metrics is crucial. Startups should prioritize actionable metrics that provide clear insights into their performance and allow them to make data-driven decisions. The importance of cohort analysis. RISE introduces the idea of cohort analysis as a way to understand the behavior of groups of users over time. Instead of just measuring aggregate numbers like total sign-ups or overall sales, cohort analysis allows startups to track groups of users who share common characteristics and analyze how they behave differently over time. This deeper understanding of customer behavior helps startups identify trends and opportunities to improve retention and engagement. For example, a startup could track the behavior of users who signed up in a particular month and compare their actions to users who signed up in a different month. This method allows businesses to identify whether a product update, marketing campaign, or feature change led to significant shifts in customer behavior. Cohort analysis allows startups to better understand the causes behind their metrics, making it easier to pinpoint problems or opportunities for growth. Innovation accounting. Another key concept introduced in Chapter 7 is innovation accounting. Since lean startups often operate in conditions of extreme uncertainty, traditional financial metrics such as profit and loss, PL, statements or ROI may not be the most relevant or accurate indicators of success in the early stages. Instead, innovation accounting focuses on defining metrics that measure the actual progress of innovation efforts. RISE describes 3 steps in innovation accounting. Establishing a baseline. This involves tracking existing metrics to understand the current state of startup. For example, measuring the number of active users or customer retention rate helps set a baseline from which progress can be measured. Measuring the progress. After implementing a new feature or campaign, the next step is to track the impact of that initiative on key metrics. Startups should look for early signs of progress, such as an increase in user engagement, retention, or conversion rates. Pivoting or persevering. The final step is making the decision whether to pivot or persevere based on the data. If the metrics show that the changes are having a positive effect, then the startup should continue on its current path. However, if the data shows no meaningful progress, the startup may need to pivot and test a different approach. Innovation accounting provides a structured way to measure progress in an uncertain environment and helps startups move away from guesswork and focus on tangible, data-driven insights. This approach is particularly useful in early-stage startups where the path to product-market fit is often unclear and experimentation is essential. The metrics that matter. RISE stresses that startups must focus on the metrics that matter. Those metrics that directly correlate with customer engagement, product usage, and the financial viability of the business. These metrics will depend on the nature of the startup and its specific goals, but RISE outlines a few key categories of metrics that are important to consider. Activation metrics. These measure how well customers are engaging with the product and taking the first steps toward deriving value. For example, an activation metric for a mobile app could be the number of users who complete a specific action, such as signing up, creating an account, or making their first purchase. Engagement metrics. These measure how frequently and consistently customers are using the product. Engagement metrics could include the frequency of logins, number of interactions with the product, or time spent using the product. Retention metrics. These track how well the product is retaining customers over time. Retention metrics are crucial because they reveal whether the product provides lasting value to users. A common retention metric is the number of users who continue using the product after a certain period, such as a week or a month. Referral metrics. These measure how many customers are recommending the product to others, either through word of mouth or social sharing. Referral metrics are a good indicator of customer satisfaction and product-market fit. Revenue metrics. These track the startup's ability to generate revenue and become profitable. For example, revenue metrics might include average revenue per user, ARPU, customer lifetime value, CLTV, or customer acquisition cost, CAC. These metrics help assess the financial sustainability of the business. By focusing on these types of metrics, startups can gain insights into customer behavior, identify opportunities for improvement, and make better informed decisions about their product and business model. The power of A/B testing. In the measure chapter, RISE also highlights the importance of A/B testing as a way to measure customer response to different product variations or marketing strategies. A/B testing allows startups to compare two versions of a product feature or campaign and determine which one performs better based on real user data. This type of experimentation enables startups to make data-driven decisions about product development and the marketing strategies. For example, a startup could A/B test two different sign-up flows for a website and determine which one leads to a higher conversion rate. Similarly, a startup might test two different email subject lines to see which one generates more opens and clicks. A/B testing is a powerful tool for understanding customer preferences and optimizing the product experience. Conclusion. In Chapter 7, Measure, Eric Ries emphasizes the importance of focusing on the right metrics to evaluate the progress of a startup and make informed decisions about the future. Startups should avoid vanity metrics and instead track actionable metrics that provide meaningful insights into customer behavior and product performance. By applying innovation accounting, measuring progress, and leveraging cohort analysis and A/B testing, startups can reduce uncertainty and increase their chances of success. The chapter underscores that effective measurement is crucial in the lean startup process because it helps guide startups through the build measure learn loop and brings clarity to decisions about whether to pivot or persevere. Through a disciplined and data-driven approach to measurement, startups can maximize their learning and move closer to achieving product market fit. Page 11. Chapter 8, Pivot, or Persevere, A Analysis of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Chapter 8 of the Lean Startup, titled Pivot, or Persevere, is a pivotal moment in the lean startup methodology. In this chapter, Eric Ries addresses the crucial decision-making point in the build measure learn feedback loop, whether to continue with the current approach, persevere, or change direction, pivot. This chapter explores how startups can make the decision to either double down on their current course based on positive feedback or radically change their approach based on learning from customer feedback and experimentation. In essence, this chapter describes the moment when startups need to make a major decision: is the current product working? Or is a change of direction necessary? The critical decision, pivot or persevere in the startup world, especially in the early stages, uncertainty is high, and the product market fit is often elusive. Startups must be agile enough to adapt and change their course based on real-world data and feedback from customers. Once a startup has conducted experiments, measured their results, and learned from those insights, it faces a critical decision: should the startup pivot or persevere? Persevering means continuing to refine and improve the current strategy based on the validation and insights obtained from customers. Pivoting means making a fundamental change to the business model, product, or strategy, typically based on the recognition that the current approach isn't working and the startup has not yet found a sustainable product market fit. Ries argues that the ability to pivot at the right time is essential for the success of a lean startup. It's about being flexible, open to new possibilities, and, most importantly, learning from the market. However, pivoting is not about giving up too easily. Rather, it's about being willing to adjust the approach to better meet the needs of the customers and improve the startup's chances of success. What is a pivot? Ries defines a pivot as a structured course correction designed to test a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, strategy, or engine of growth. This definition of pivoting is grounded in the idea of changing the direction of the startup but doing so based on learning and evidence gathered from the market. A pivot is not about abandoning the startup's vision but instead adapting it to better serve the market and customers. Examples of pivots include: product pivot, changing the product to serve a different market or fulfill a different need. Customer segment pivot, changing the target market for a product to a new group of customers that may benefit more from the offering. Customer need pivot, identifying a different, more pressing problem that the product could solve, changing the direction of the product's development. Technology pivot, shifting the underlying technology platform or system to better support the product's goals. Revenue model pivot, altering the method of generating revenue from the product, such as switching from a subscription model to a pay-per-use model. The key takeaway is that pivots are not random changes. They are guided by data, customer feedback, and the insights gained from the build measure learn loop. A pivot should be a strategic decision to improve the startup's likelihood of success based on learned information. When to pivot or persevere? Deciding whether to pivot or persevere is often one of the toughest challenges faced by entrepreneurs. The decision hinges on whether the data supports the current direction or suggests that a new approach is needed. Ries outlines several factors to consider when making the pivot or persevere decision. Continuous data gathering. Startups must constantly measure and gather data on their product and customers. The data can show whether the business is gaining traction or facing significant challenges. Regular experimentation and hypothesis testing will help identify whether the initial assumptions hold true or need to be revised. Learning from customers. Listening to customers is essential in the pivot or persevere decision. Startups should be collecting feedback from their users, paying attention to their pain points, preferences, and willingness to engage with the product. If customers aren't excited about the product, it may be a sign that a pivot is needed. The build measure learn loop. The feedback loop of build measure learn is key to this decision-making process. After testing the MVP and measuring the results, startups need to reflect on the insights gained. If the results support the hypothesis that the product is meeting customer needs, it's time to persevere. If the feedback suggests a mismatch, it's time to consider a pivot. The quality of feedback. It's important to distinguish between meaningful feedback that indicates a real need for change and less substantial feedback. For instance, a single customer's negative opinion shouldn't lead to a pivot, but if a significant number of customers express dissatisfaction with a key aspect of the product, this may indicate the need for a change in direction. The speed of learning. The speed at which a startup learns from its experiments and pivots is crucial. A slow or delayed learning process can prevent the startup from adjusting to market demands and can lead to wasted resources. The faster the learning, the quicker the startup can determine whether to pivot or persevere. The quality of the product market fit. Product market fit is the ultimate test of whether a startup should pivot or persevere. If the product is well received by customers and solves a significant problem, the startup should persevere and continue to refine and scale its offering. If the product does not resonate with customers or solve their problem, the startup may need to pivot to find a more viable product market fit. Examples of successful pivots. Rise illustrates the power of pivoting with several well-known startup stories, where companies changed direction based on feedback and ultimately found success. Instagram. Originally, Instagram started as a location-based check-in app called Bourbon, but after seeing that users were more interested in sharing photos, the team pivoted to focus entirely on photo sharing, and Instagram became one of the most successful social media platforms. Twitter. Twitter started as a podcast platform called Adeo, but after Apple introduced podcasting to iTunes, the founders pivoted to focus on microblogging, which eventually led to Twitter's massive success. These examples highlight that a pivot is not about failure, rather, it's about responding to feedback and rethinking the product or strategy in a way that better aligns with customer needs. Successful pivots allow startups to stay flexible and adapt in the face of changing market conditions, increasing their chances of eventual success. The importance of perseverance while pivoting is an important tool for adapting to the market. Rise stresses that perseverance can often be the best option when the current course is showing signs of progress. Perseverance means continuing to refine the product, marketing strategy, and business model based on customer feedback, even when there are challenges. The decision to persevere is often not as clear-cut as pivoting, and it requires careful consideration of the feedback, metrics, and insights gained. Persevering doesn't mean ignoring feedback or pushing ahead blindly. It means acknowledging the areas for improvement and making incremental changes that build on what has already been learned. The Pivot or Persevere Meeting. Rise describes the process of making the pivot or persevere decision as a formal meeting between the startup's founders and key team members. In these meetings, the team reflects on the data, customer feedback, and lessons learned. They ask the hard questions: are we seeing signs of product market fit? Is there sufficient demand for our product? Are we making progress toward achieving our vision? These meetings should be focused on data and learning, not emotions or personal attachment to the original idea. The decision should be made based on the facts at hand and the insights gained from experimentation. In some cases, the team might decide that the current direction is working and decide to persevere. In others, they may determine that a pivot is necessary to address unmet customer needs or seize new opportunities. Conclusion. In Chapter 8, Pivot, or Persevere, Eric Ries emphasizes that the ability to pivot or persevere is a fundamental aspect of the lean startup methodology. Startups must be willing to change direction based on evidence from the market, even if that means abandoning an initial hypothesis or strategy. The decision to pivot or persevere should be driven by data, customer feedback, and insights from the build-measure-learn feedback loop. Startups that embrace flexibility and adaptability have a greater chance of finding product market fit and achieving long-term success. The ability to pivot when necessary and the discipline to persevere when the product is showing signs of progress are key traits of successful lean startups. Page 12. Chapter 9, Batch A. Analysis of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Chapter 9 of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, titled Batch, focuses on the importance of working in small batches to foster efficiency, learning, and agility in the startup process. In this chapter, Ries introduces the concept of batch processing, emphasizing how smaller, more manageable chunks of work enable startups to adapt faster, reduce waste, and improve their ability to respond to feedback. The key message in this chapter is that large, monolithic tasks, whether they involve product development, testing, or production, can lead to delays, waste, and missed opportunities for learning. Instead, startups should adopt a small batch approach to their operations, breaking down tasks into smaller parts that can be completed more quickly, iterated on, and measured for effectiveness. The problem with large batches. Rise begins the chapter by addressing the common practice of working in large batches, which is prevalent in many industries, including startups. In a traditional model, large batches are often used to complete major tasks, such as producing large quantities of product, coding an entire feature in one go, or testing multiple hypotheses all at once. While this approach might seem efficient in theory, it introduces several significant problems for startups. Delayed feedback. In large batches, tasks take longer to complete, which means that feedback loops are also delayed. For example, if a startup develops a feature in one large batch, it might take weeks or even months to gather sufficient feedback from customers. During this time, the startup is operating based on assumptions that could quickly be disproven, leading to wasted resources. Wasted resources. Large batches can result in significant waste. If a feature or product is built based on faulty assumptions, a large amount of time, energy, and capital can be wasted on something that ultimately doesn't meet customer needs. Overhead and complexity. Large batches create additional complexity and overhead. For example, if a feature is coded and deployed all at once, any problems that arise during the processor such as bugs or technical issues can become more difficult to identify and fix because of the scale of the work. Additionally, integrating new features in large batches can cause confusion and delays in deployment. Limited adaptability. When startups work in large batches, they become less nimble. If new information comes to light or customer needs change, it can be difficult to pivot or change direction without delaying the entire process. Large batches are harder to adjust to new circumstances, making startups more vulnerable to market shifts. The power of small batches. In contrast, small batches allow for faster iteration and more frequent feedback. By breaking down tasks into smaller chunks, startups can address challenges more quickly, respond to feedback sooner, and ultimately make decisions based on data rather than assumptions. Here are some key benefits of working in small batches. Faster feedback loops. With small batches, startups can test assumptions more quickly. Rather than waiting weeks to see if a feature resonates with customers, they can gather feedback within days or even hours. This enables them to make informed decisions based on real-world data, rather than operating on hunches or assumptions. Reduced risk. Small batches help reduce the risk of failure. By testing smaller changes more frequently, startups can catch potential issues early on, preventing the kind of large-scale failures that can occur when big features or products are launched all at once. Small batches also allow startups to make incremental improvements, increasing their chances of success over time. Easier problem solving. When working in smaller batches, it's easier to identify and fix problems as they arise. For example, if a bug or design flaw is discovered, it's easier to isolate the issue when the work is broken into smaller chunks. This makes it less likely that a single problem will delay or derail the entire project. Improved focus. Working in small batches can help startups maintain focus and avoid distractions. Rather than juggling multiple large tasks, teams can focus on one small piece of work at a time, ensuring that it's completed to the best of their ability before moving on to the next task. More flexibility and agility. Small batches allow startups to be more flexible. They can pivot more easily if customer feedback suggests that a different direction is needed. Small batches also enable startups to adjust their processes more frequently, making them more agile in responding to market demands or new information. Applying small batches to startups. Rise provides several examples of how small batches can be applied across different areas of a startup's operations. These areas include product development, marketing, and even organizational structure. Here's a breakdown of how small batches can improve each of these areas. 1. Product development. In product development, working in small batches means developing smaller, incremental features or improvements, rather than working on large, complex features that take weeks or months to finish. This allows startups to quickly test and validate product hypotheses, obtain user feedback faster and use it to adjust the product accordingly. Release updates more frequently, creating a continuous cycle of improvement. Startups should aim to get their MVP, minimum viable product, into the hands of customers as soon as possible and use that feedback to guide the next steps. By doing this, they avoid investing too much time in features that customers don't want or need. 2. Marketing. Small batch marketing involves testing different marketing strategies in small, controlled experiments, rather than rolling out a huge campaign all at once. By conducting A/B testing on landing pages, ads, or email campaigns, startups can quickly assess what resonates with their audience and refine their approach. This approach helps startups optimize marketing efforts based on real-time data. Maximize their marketing budget by focusing on the tactics that work. Avoid wasting resources on ineffective campaigns. 3. Organizational structure and workflow. Small batches are not just about the work itself, they also apply to the way teams are structured and how work is managed. In traditional models, teams might work in large departments with long-term projects, which can lead to inefficiency and slower decision-making. In contrast, startups working with small batches can organize work into smaller, cross-functional teams that can make decisions quickly and efficiently. Have shorter feedback loops within teams, improving the speed at which work gets done. encourage better communication and collaboration between different areas of the company, such as engineering, design, and marketing. Overcoming the resistance to small batches while working in small batches offers clear advantages. Rise acknowledges that many companies resist this approach due to entrenched beliefs and traditional practices. These may include fear of wasting resources. Many startups are reluctant to adopt small batches because they fear it will lead to inefficiency or wasted effort. However, as Rise points out, small batches actually reduce waste by providing quicker insights and better opportunities for course correction. The myth of efficiency. People often associate large batches with efficiency, believing that larger operations lead to greater economies of scale. However, in the context of startups, working in small batches often proves more efficient because it enables faster learning, more effective problem solving, and quicker adaptation to market needs. Cultural resistance. In some organizations, there is a strong cultural bias towards big wins and a focus on completing large projects. Overcoming this mindset can require a shift in organizational culture, emphasizing learning and flexibility rather than simply completing big tasks. Conclusion. In Chapter 9, Batch, Eric Ries advocates for the practice of working in small batches to improve startup efficiency, flexibility, and learning. He demonstrates that by breaking down tasks into smaller, manageable pieces, startups can gather feedback more quickly, make informed decisions, and reduce the risk of failure. Small batches allow startups to stay agile, iterate rapidly, and focus on customer needs. By applying this principle to product development, marketing, and organizational structure, startups can increase their chances of success and optimize the use of their resources. Ultimately, small batches foster a culture of continuous learning and improvement, which is essential for startups that want to thrive in an uncertain and fast-moving market. Page 13. Chapter 10, Grow A Analysis of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. In Chapter 10 of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, titled Grow, the focus shifts to one of the most critical stages for any startup, scaling. Once a startup has validated its product, refined its business model, and established a market fit, the next natural step is to grow. This chapter delves into the strategies, principles, and challenges associated with scaling a startup while maintaining the lean and agile practices that have led to its early success. Ries emphasizes that growth must be approached with caution and precision, and it requires the startup to carefully balance innovation, customer feedback, and operational efficiency. This chapter is designed to help startups navigate the complexities of growth, offering insights on how to expand while staying true to the principles of lean startup methodology: iteration, learning, and minimizing waste. The need for sustainable growth. One of the core tenets of this chapter is the idea of sustainable growth. Eric Ries stresses that a startup's growth should not be driven by simply increasing output or gaining more customers at any cost. Instead, growth should be the result of systematic, measured, and purposeful efforts. In other words, growth should be scalable and replicable over time, building on what has already been proven to work rather than chasing after short-term success. Ries introduces the concept of the growth hypothesis, or the idea that every startup has a hypothesis about how its business will grow, and this hypothesis must be validated before scaling up operations. The chapter underscores the importance of proving that growth can be sustained and that it isn't just the result of external factors or temporary trends. The engines of growth. Ries categorizes growth into three primary engines of growth that startups can leverage to scale their business effectively. Each engine represents a different approach to growth, with its own strategies, methods, and potential challenges. Sticky engine of growth. The sticky engine of growth is based on retaining customers over time. This engine focuses on building a customer base that continues to use the product and, ideally, returns regularly. This engine is most effective for businesses that aim for customer retention rather than customer acquisition. In a sticky engine, the challenge is to minimize churn and maximize customer satisfaction. Businesses that use this engine focus on improving customer service, refining the user experience, and building long-term relationships with their customers. Sticky growth can lead to viral loops, where satisfied customers spread the word and refer others to the product, thereby increasing the user base organically. Ries highlights that the sticky engine is often underappreciated. Many startups focus so heavily on acquiring new customers that they overlook the importance of retaining existing ones. The key to growth with the sticky engine lies in continual engagement and providing real value that keeps customers coming back. Viral engine of growth. The viral engine of growth focuses on users actively spreading the word about the product to new customers. This can happen through direct sharing or referrals, turning each customer into a potential marketer for the product. Social media platforms, word-of-mouth marketing, and viral content are often associated with this growth engine. For the viral engine to work, the product itself must be inherently shareable. There must be an easy and compelling reason for customers to tell others about it, whether it's because of a unique feature, exceptional user experience, or something customers believe is worth sharing. The challenge with a viral engine is that it requires early adopters to be particularly engaged and willing to spread the word. To build a successful viral engine, the startup must ensure that the product resonates deeply with its target audience, creating network effects and ensuring that the more people who use the product, the more valuable it becomes. Paid engine of growth. The paid engine of growth is driven by acquisition through marketing and advertising. In this model, a startup invests in paid ads, social media promotions, or other forms of marketing to acquire customers at a scale that can sustain business growth. This growth engine often requires startups to invest heavily in customer acquisition channels that offer a positive return on investment, ROI. While the paid engine can quickly bring in a large number of customers, it also presents significant risks. Startups must continually test and optimize their marketing spend to ensure that the cost of acquiring a customer is less than the revenue generated by that customer over time. A key consideration in this engine is ensuring that marketing campaigns are data-driven and focused on long-term profitability rather than short-term growth. Metrics for growth. Rise emphasizes the importance of measuring the right metrics during the growth phase. While it might be tempting to focus solely on top-line numbers such as total revenue or customer acquisition, Rise argues that startups should focus on metrics that reflect the health and sustainability of growth. These metrics are broken down into several categories. Innovation metrics. These include metrics that show how well the startup is innovating, such as the rate at which new features or improvements are being developed. The goal here is to measure how quickly the company is able to experiment and iterate on its product. Vanity metrics. These are numbers that look impressive on paper but don't necessarily reflect the startup's success or the health of the business. For example, a high number of website visits might be an appealing vanity metric, but it doesn't tell you whether those visits are translating into actual sales or loyal customers. Actionable metrics. These are the metrics that matter most when growing a startup. They provide data that can inform decisions about how to improve and scale the business. Actionable metrics include customer retention rates, conversion rates, and lifetime value of customer. The key to measuring growth is finding a balance between all these metrics and ensuring that they provide actionable insights into how the business can sustain and scale its growth efforts. The importance of innovation and iteration. Despite the emphasis on growth, Rise warns that startups must continue to innovate and iterate during the growth phase. Scaling too quickly without enough focus on product development can lead to failure. Startups must continue validating their product market fit and responding to customer feedback, even as they scale. The growth stage should not be a time of abandoning the lean startup principles of experimenting, measuring, and learning. Rise suggests that successful startups combine innovation with scaling. They grow by continuously refining their product while expanding their reach and operations. This iterative process helps avoid the pitfalls of scaling too quickly, without the backing of a strong, validated product or business model. Managing scaling challenges. One of the core challenges of growth is maintaining quality while expanding rapidly. As startups scale, they often encounter growing pains related to operational efficiency, customer support, and product consistency. Rise emphasizes that managing these challenges requires a thoughtful approach, as scaling without addressing these issues can lead to dilution of the customer experience and brand damage. Startups should carefully consider how to build systems that can handle increasing complexity. For example, as the customer base grows, the company will need to invest in automated systems, hire additional staff, and optimize workflows to ensure consistent service. Training and scaling infrastructure are also key components to sustaining growth without compromising on quality. Conclusion. Chapter 10 of the Lean Startup emphasizes that scaling a startup is a delicate balance between expansion and sustainable growth. Eric Ries underscores that growth should not be pursued for its own sake, but should be based on a deep understanding of the market, customer feedback, and the ability to innovate continuously. He provides 3 distinct engines of growth: a sticky, viral, and paid, each of which requires different strategies and metrics for success. By maintaining focus on the right metrics, innovating continuously, and adapting to feedback, startups can successfully grow and scale their operations without losing their lean startup advantage. This chapter offers a valuable framework for startups seeking to navigate the complexities of growth while avoiding the common pitfalls that often accompany scaling. Page 14. Chapter 11, Adapt. A detailed analysis of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. In Chapter 11 of the Lean Startup, titled Adapt, Eric Ries explores the concept of adaptation as a critical element for the success and survival of startups. As businesses progress through the Lean Startup cycle, building, measuring, learning, the next logical step is the ability to adapt based on what has been learned from experiments, data, and feedback. This chapter emphasizes that adaptation is not just about changing direction when things go wrong, but rather a continuous process of adjusting and refining products, strategies, and business models to better meet the needs of customers and the market. Rise discusses how adaptation is essential not only for pivoting or changing course, but also for evolving the startup's internal processes, leadership, and strategic priorities. For a startup to succeed in an ever-changing market, it must be nimble, receptive to feedback, and capable of making data-driven decisions to guide its next steps. The role of adaptation in lean startup adaptation, as outlined in this chapter, is about learning and improving continuously. It's not just about reacting to market changes but about creating an internal culture where change is part of the company's DNA. The process of adaptation should be data-driven, iterative, and guided by the lessons learned from testing and experimentation. Rise highlights that adaptation isn't a sign of failure or weakness. Instead, it is part of the entrepreneurial process, a necessary response to new information, shifting market dynamics, and evolving customer needs. He uses several examples of companies that were able to adapt their strategies to capitalize on opportunities and overcome challenges. These businesses thrived not by sticking to rigid plans but by learning from their mistakes and adapting rapidly to ensure their offerings stayed relevant. The importance of adapting early, and often Rise emphasizes the importance of adapting early in the startup's life cycle. Many startups face the temptation to stick with a vision or product idea long after it has been shown not to work. This often leads to wasted resources, a loss of focus, and a failure to achieve product-market fit. Instead, startups should be guided by a scientific mindset, where hypotheses are constantly tested and revised based on the data that emerges from real-world experiments. By adopting a mindset of continuous learning and adaptation, startups can minimize risk and avoid costly mistakes. This iterative process allows for the company to change course quickly, before spending significant time and money on a path that doesn't yield results. The core principle behind this is that failure is not fatal, but rather it's part of the learning process that ultimately leads to success. Measuring adaptation in the lean startup framework. Adaptation is always tied to data and metrics. Rise cautions that vanity metrics, such as total website visits or social media likes, are not sufficient indicators of progress or success. Instead, startups must focus on actionable metrics, those that directly reflect the startup's ability to meet customer needs and achieve growth. These metrics provide guidance on where to adapt, how to tweak processes, and when to pivot. Rise also introduces the concept of innovation accounting, a system for measuring the progress of a startup, especially when operating in uncertainty. Innovation accounting focuses on identifying metrics that give insight into the startup's ability to validate assumptions and achieve its long-term vision. It enables a startup to assess whether it's on track to create sustainable value or whether it needs to adapt its strategy. For example, if a startup's initial assumptions about its customer base are proven incorrect through testing, innovation accounting can help the company decide whether to pivot, adjust its approach, or continue on its current trajectory. This process forces the startup to make data-driven decisions and keep adaptation at the core of its strategy. The pivot, a key tool for adaptation. One of the most important forms of adaptation in the lean startup methodology is the pivot. While a pivot has been discussed in earlier chapters, in Chapter 11, Rise delves deeper into when and how a pivot should happen. He emphasizes that pivots are necessary when the current strategy is not working. A pivot isn't about abandoning the startup's mission or vision, but rather about adjusting the approach based on new insights or market feedback. There are various types of pivots, such as zoom-in pivot, focus on a single feature or component of the product that resonates more with customers than the original broad offering. Customer segment pivot, change the target market or customer segment to find the right audience. Technology pivot, change the technology platform to create a more viable or scalable product. Business model pivot, shift the business model to find a more sustainable path to revenue. Rise emphasizes that a pivot is not about completely abandoning the original vision, but about reimagining the product and the way it's offered to the market. Startups should pivot only when they have solid evidence or data or feedback from customers that indicates a change is necessary. Making a decision to pivot should be grounded in clear insights, rather than gut feelings or frustration with initial setbacks. Learning from failure and iteration. Another significant part of adapting is learning from failure. In the lean startup process, failures are inevitably, but the key is to learn quickly and efficiently from them. Startups that fail to adapt are often those that don't have clear process for capturing insights and using them to inform decisions. Rise suggests that the most successful startups are those that embrace failure as part of the learning process. Instead of seeing failure as a final outcome, startups should treat failures as valuable data points that can inform the next round of experiments. This mindset leads to rapid iteration, where each failure is a stepping stone toward a better, more refined product. One of the benefits of the lean startup methodology is its ability to accelerate learning and reduce the time between failure and improvement. Startups that are committed to continuous adaptation use each experiment, as successful or not, as an opportunity to refine their approach and improve their chances of success. This iterative learning process is key to developing products that better meet customer needs and adjusting strategies to find sustainable market fit. Building a culture of adaptation. Creating a culture of adaptation within a startup is essential for its long-term success. Rise explains that leaders must model adaptability by being open to feedback, encouraging experimentation, and demonstrating a willingness to change direction when necessary. Top-down commitment to the lean startup principles helps build an environment where failure is seen as a natural part of the innovation process, and where team members feel empowered to experiment and make changes. In such a culture, the focus is on outcomes or achieving meaningful results through data-driven decisions rather than just sticking to a predetermined plan. Leaders must cultivate a sense of psychological safety, where employees feel comfortable proposing new ideas, testing hypotheses, and admitting when things are not working. Additionally, adaptation is not limited to product changes but must extend to the startup's internal processes, customer relationships, and organizational structures. The entire startup must be agile, and its leadership must encourage innovation, experimentation, and learning across all departments. Conclusion: a mindset of continuous adaptation. In conclusion, Chapter 11 of the Lean Startup emphasizes that adaptation is not a one-time event but an ongoing process. Startups must learn how to adjust to new information, changing market conditions, and evolving customer needs. Eric Ries underscores that adaptation is about staying open to change, leveraging data, and being willing to pivot when necessary. The key to successful adaptation is rapid experimentation, where startups continuously test their hypotheses and adjust their business model and strategies based on real-world results. Adaptation enables startups to thrive in uncertain and rapidly changing markets, helping them avoid stagnation and ensuring they can achieve long-term growth and success. Ultimately, startups that master the art of adaptation are those that remain flexible, respond proactively to change, and maintain a relentless focus on learning and improvement. By embracing the principles of adaptation, startups can increase their chances of surviving the early stages of development and position themselves for sustainable growth in a competitive marketplace. Page 15. Chapter 12, Innovate. A detailed analysis of the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. In Chapter 12 of the Lean Startup, titled Innovate, Eric Ries takes a deep dive into the crucial role that innovation plays within the Lean Startup framework. This chapter emphasizes that innovation is not just about creating new ideas or products but about fostering an environment where continuous innovation drives long-term success. While earlier chapters have focused on the mechanics of building, testing, measuring, and adapting, Innovate shifts the conversation toward the broader goal of achieving sustainable innovation that benefits both the startup and the market. Rise argues that innovation should be at the heart of every startup's mission, not just in the form of groundbreaking new products, but in how a startup runs its processes, engages with customers, and positions itself in the market. In this chapter, he lays out a vision of how innovation can be integrated into a startup's culture, and how it can contribute to a feedback loop that fuels constant learning and growth. The core of innovation, continuous improvement. Rise opens the chapter by framing innovation as a process of continuous improvement. While many people think of innovation as a moment of inspiration or a major breakthrough, Rise views it as a dynamic, ongoing cycle. In the Lean Startup methodology, innovation is built into the feedback loop, where each iteration of the product or process brings new opportunities for innovation. At its core, innovation in a startup is about solving problems in new ways, improving existing products, and finding more efficient methods to meet customer needs. The challenge, however, is to create an environment that supports experimentation and creative problem-solving. This requires fostering a culture where teams feel empowered to come up with new ideas and have the autonomy to test and iterate quickly. This chapter emphasizes that innovation should not be confined to product development. Startups should also innovate in their business models, marketing strategies, and customer engagement practices. Innovation can take many forms, from optimizing internal processes to exploring new ways to deliver value to customers. The goal is to create a sustainable competitive advantage by continuously refining and improving every aspect of a business. The role of innovation accounting, one of the key tools Rise discusses in this chapter for tracking and enabling innovation, is innovation accounting. This system, introduced in Chapter 7, helps startups measure progress even when they're in the early stages of development and may not yet have traditional financial metrics to track their success. Innovation accounting focuses on identifying actionable metrics that help guide the startup's decisions about what to change, pivot, or scale. By using innovation accounting, startups can avoid the temptation to follow vanity metrics and instead focus on those that directly indicate whether their innovations are moving the needle in the right direction. For example, metrics like customer acquisition cost, customer lifetime value, and churn rate are all indicators that help startups understand the effectiveness of their innovation efforts. Rise stresses that successful innovation does not happen in isolation. It needs to be rooted in data, tested with real customers, and validated through experimentation. Innovation accounting ensures that the outcomes of those experiments are captured in a way that provides valuable insights into whether the innovation is worth pursuing at scale. creating a culture of innovation. For a startup to sustain innovation over time, it must create a culture that embraces it. Rise discusses the importance of leadership's role in fostering a culture of innovation. The leadership team must set the tone by demonstrating openness to new ideas, encouraging cross-functional collaboration, and rewarding creative risk-taking. This type of culture also includes psychological safety, the idea that employees should feel comfortable sharing their ideas, even if they are unconventional or risky. In an innovative culture, failure is not seen as something to be punished, but as an opportunity for learning and growth. Leaders must create an environment where it is safe to experiment and where team members know that their ideas will be heard and tested. Moreover, Rise highlights the importance of building autonomy into the startup's structure. Innovation often comes from giving teams the freedom to experiment and to make decisions without excessive oversight. Autonomy, combined with a clear sense of purpose and a commitment to rapid experimentation, ensures that the startup's innovation efforts remain aligned with its mission while allowing for creative and agile responses to new opportunities. The importance of scaling innovation. As startups grow, the challenge of innovation becomes more complex. In this chapter, Rise outlines how scaling the business introduces new obstacles for maintaining the same level of innovation. As organizations grow, there's often a tendency to standardize processes and reduce flexibility in favor of efficiency. However, this can stifle creativity and slow down innovation. Rise emphasizes the importance of maintaining a startup's core principles of rapid experimentation, learning, and adaptation even as the company scales. Scaling should not mean abandoning the principles of the lean startup model. Rather, it should involve finding ways to apply those principles in new contexts. Startups must figure out how to scale innovation across teams, geographies, and products while maintaining the nimbleness that initially drove their success. To scale innovation successfully, Rise recommends creating small, autonomous teams that are empowered to innovate and experiment within a larger, structured framework. This way, the company can maintain its innovative edge while benefiting from the efficiencies that come with scale. These teams can work on specific challenges or projects, driving new ideas and innovations without being constrained by bureaucracy or slow decision-making processes. Innovating in business models. While product innovation is essential, business model innovation is just as important. Rise devotes a significant portion of this chapter to discussing how startups can innovate in their business models, how they make money, how they interact with customers, and how they deliver value in ways that competitors cannot easily replicate. Startups, particularly in the tech space, can often fall into the trap of focusing only on the product without considering how the business model can evolve over time. For instance, companies might explore alternative revenue models, such as subscription services, freemium models, or partnership strategies, as ways to innovate in how they generate revenue. Business model innovation often goes hand in hand with customer feedback. As startups learn more about their customers and how they use their products, they can discover new ways to monetize, engage, or offer additional value. For example, Netflix famously transitioned from a DVD rental business to a streaming service, completely revolutionizing its business model to better serve the market's evolving needs. Rise also touches on how startups can combine business model innovation with lean principles. This might involve starting with a minimum viable product, MVP, in one market segment and gradually expanding into new ones based on customer feedback. By continually testing and validating new business models, startups can avoid costly mistakes and position themselves for long-term success. The long-term vision, sustainable innovation. Finally, Rise reflects on how startups can create a sustainable innovation engine. The true goal of a startup is not just to build a great product or even a great business model, but to create a company that can continuously innovate over the long term. This is a challenging goal because it requires organizational resilience, the ability to pivot quickly in response to changing market conditions, and the ability to keep innovating in a competitive landscape. Sustainable innovation requires building processes that allow for constant learning and adaptation. It also means that the leadership team must invest in the right talent, support a culture of innovation, and ensure that the company has the right systems in place to measure progress and make adjustments when necessary. Startups must aim to become innovation engines, or organizations that never stop learning, experimenting, and evolving. As Rise puts it, the key to success is not just innovating once but creating a framework that allows the startup to innovate continuously and sustainably. This type of innovation is what ultimately leads to long-term success, market leadership, and lasting customer loyalty. Conclusion: the power of continuous innovation. In conclusion, Chapter 12 of the Lean Startup, titled Innovate, encapsulates the idea that innovation is not a one-time event but a continuous journey. Eric Ries outlines the need for startups to build innovation into the fabric of their company, encouraging experimentation, embracing failure, and constantly refining their products, business models, and strategies. For startups to thrive in competitive and rapidly changing markets, they must create a culture of innovation that is driven by data, tested with customers, and capable of scaling over time. With the right mindset, systems, and processes in place, innovation becomes a powerful force that not only drives growth but also ensures that the startup remains agile, responsive, and ahead of the competition.